I cried in the restaurant bathroom, over a broken engagement. The Mafia boss in the next stall slid me a note. Let me show you how a real man treats a woman. The clink of champagne flutes had ceased. A silence, heavy and suffocating, descended upon the linen-draped tables, each flickering candle reflecting the horror dawning on my face. Liam's voice, usually a smooth, practiced baritone, had cracked on the final, devastating word, impossible. The diamond, meant to signify a future woven with promise, now glittered in its velvet box on the white tablecloth, a cruel spotlight on my public execution. A tremor ran through my hands, but I gripped the delicate stem of my wine glass, anchoring myself to the present, to the brutal reality unfurling. The air thickened with unspoken pity and thinly veiled glee from the other diners. My cheeks burned, a fire stoked not by anger, but by a profound, marrow-deep humiliation. This wasn't just a breakup. It was the annihilation of every expectation, every whispered dream, performed for an audience of socialites and power brokers in the most exclusive restaurant in the city. My vision blurred, but a perverse refusal to grant anyone the satisfaction of seeing my tears kept them at bay. Liam sat opposite me, his handsome face a mask of practiced regret, though a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in his lip betrayed the genuine satisfaction of a man who had successfully extricated himself from an obligation. His mother, an icy blonde whose gaze could curdle milk, watched from a nearby table, her expression a mix of triumph and thinly veiled disgust. My own parents, seated beside her, were a study in frozen shock, their dreams of a politically advantageous alliance shattering alongside mine. My throat constricted. The foie gras, a delicacy I had once anticipated, now tasted like ash on my tongue. Every part of me screamed for escape, not just from this table, but from this skin. This life that had just been irrevocably derailed. I pushed back my chair with a jarring scrape, the sound echoing in the oppressive quiet. My legs felt like brittle glass, threatening to buckle beneath me. But sheer will propelled me forward. I navigated the maze of tables, past the knowing glances and hushed murmurs, each one a fresh lash across my exposed spirit. My gaze remained fixed on the ornate double doors leading to the restrooms, a sanctuary, however temporary, from the crushing weight of public scorn. The ladies' room was mercifully empty. I stumbled into the furthest stall, the lock clicking like a final desperate reprieve. The dam burst. Tears, hot and furious, streamed down my face, blurring the gilded wallpaper, the opulent marble. My chest ached with a hollowness I hadn't known could exist, a cavern where hope had once resided. Liam. 10 years, vanished in a single gut-wrenching moment. He hadn't just broken an engagement. He had cleaved my future in two, leaving me bleeding and exposed. A faint shuffle from the adjacent men's restroom pierced the fog of my despair. A low cough, then the soft scrape of something sliding under the partition between the stalls. My breath hitched. Curiosity, an unwelcome guest, pricked at the edges of my grief. I leaned forward, my eyes red-rimmed and swollen, focusing on the sliver of white paper, a folded note. My fingers trembled as I retrieved it. The elegant, heavy stock, a stark contrast to the blunt, almost savage script inside. It contained only 8 words, penned with a dangerous flourish. Let me show you how a real man treats a woman. Outrage flared, a sudden, potent antidote to the self-pity that had threatened to consume me. Who was this insolent stranger? How dare he presume to witness my raw vulnerability, then offer such a brazen, arrogant declaration? A hot retort clawed at my throat, but another emotion, far more insidious, began to coil in my belly. A strange, defiant spark. A sliver of wild, forbidden curiosity. Everything in me screamed to crumple the note, to dismiss it as the audacious posturing of a stranger. But a traitorous part of me, the part that had just been publicly discarded, whispered of an escape, a reckless, intoxicating freedom. I straightened my dress, splashed cold water on my face, and attempted to reconstruct the shattered facade of composure. The note remained clutched in my hand, a dangerous secret. Stepping out of the stall, I caught my reflection in the vast, gilded mirror. My eyes still held the ghost of tears, but a flicker of something new, defiance, perhaps, shimmered in their depths. Just as I reached for the door handle, a silhouette filled the archway, cutting off my exit. Liam. His mother, Regina, stood beside him, her perfectly coiffed hair and predatory smile doing little to mask the fury in her eyes. "Maya, darling, we need to discuss this," Liam began, his tone cloyingly solicitous. "You're making a scene. People are talking." Regina stepped forward, her voice a low hiss. "You've humiliated our family. Do you understand the damage this will do to Liam's reputation? To our standing?" My jaw tightened. "My reputation?" My voice, though a little shaky, held more strength than I anticipated. "He's the one who broke off a decade-long engagement in front of half the city. If anyone's reputation is in tatters, it's mine." Liam's eyes hardened, the veneer of concern evaporating. "You brought this upon yourself, Maya, always so dramatic. Perhaps if you hadn't been so demanding." A searing rage, cold and clean, replaced the shame. "Demanding? I asked for a date, Liam. A wedding date. After 10 years, I think I was well within my rights." Regina scoffed, her gaze raking over my crumpled dress. "Please, you were a gold digger, plain and simple. We merely caught on before it was too late." The accusation struck me like a physical blow, stealing my breath. My own father was a respected FBI agent. Our family certainly wasn't poor, though we lacked the stratospheric wealth of the Fitzwilliam Empire. The injustice of it choked me. My vision began to narrow, the edges of the opulent hallway blurring. I felt a dangerous tremor start in my limbs, not of fear, but of an uncontrolled fury about to erupt. Just as I opened my mouth to unleash a torrent of years-long resentment, a deep, resonant voice cut through the air, cool and unwavering. "Is there a problem here?" The voice emanated from the men's restroom door, which now stood ajar. A man emerged, unfolding himself from the shadows. Tall, undeniably potent, he filled the space with an almost palpable authority. His suit was a masterpiece of tailoring, dark as midnight, accentuating a broad frame. His hair, black and immaculately styled, framed sharp, chiseled features. But it was his eyes that ensnared me. Irises the color of aged whiskey, deep and piercing, observing the scene with an unnervingly calm intensity. His gaze flickered to me, then to the crumpled note still clutched in my hand, a brief, knowing spark igniting within their depths. Liam, momentarily stunned, recovered with an arrogant flourish. "No problem at all, sir. Just a private family matter." The stranger's lips curved into a smile that failed to reach his eyes, a predatory baring of teeth. "It certainly doesn't sound very private." His gaze returned to me, a silent question. My voice emerged, a mere whisper. "They're harassing me." The stranger's eyes narrowed fractionally. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop several degrees. "I see." He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his presence growing, eclipsing Liam. "I understand this woman is currently under my protection. You will cease your badgering at once." Liam flushed an angry red. "Your protection? Who do you think you are? Liam!" Regina's voice was sharp, a sudden tremor of fear in her tone as she recognized the man. Her eyes, usually so confident, now held a glint of genuine apprehension. "Let's go." She tugged frantically at Liam's arm, but Liam, fueled by wounded pride, stood his ground. "No! I demand to know who this is, interfering in our affairs." The stranger's gaze slid over Liam, dismissive and chillingly devoid of emotion. "You don't want to know, Mr. Fitzwilliam. Trust me." His voice was soft, yet it carried the weight of a silent ultimatum. "Unless you wish your family's standing to diminish rather abruptly, I suggest you take your mother's advice and retreat." Regina dragged Liam away, her earlier bravado utterly extinguished. She cast a terrified glance back at the stranger, as if fearing retribution for merely making eye contact. Their hurried footsteps receded, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake. The stranger's attention returned to me, his intense gaze sweeping over my face, lingering on my lips. "Are you harmed?" The question was quiet, almost tender, yet his presence remained imbued with a raw, dangerous power. I shook my head, my mind reeling. The shift in atmosphere had been instantaneous, absolute. His unspoken threat had been more potent than any shouted command. "No," I managed, my voice still thready. "Thank you." A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched his lips. "It was my pleasure." His eyes, however, held no trace of lightness, only an unnerving depth. "You looked as though you needed saving." "I did," I admitted, surprised by my own candor. The adrenaline began to recede, leaving me feeling hollowed out, but with a strange, nascent energy stirring beneath the surface. "But who are you?" He stepped closer, invading my personal space with the ease of a predator. The scent of expensive cologne and something else, something primal, like old leather and wood smoke, enveloped me. His height cast me in shadow, making me feel small, yet strangely protected. My breath hitched. "Alessio Costa," he stated, his voice a low rumble. "And you, Maya, are about to discover what a real man's protection truly entails." His hand, warm and firm, settled on the small of my back, guiding me forward. It was not a question, but a command, pulling me from the ruins of my humiliation and into an unknown, dangerous current. My body thrummed with a strange mixture of fear and a wholly unexpected, exhilarating thrill. He led me past the deserted coat check, out into the cool night air. A sleek black luxury sedan, a phantom against the glittering city lights, waited at the curb, its engine purring softly. A silent driver held the door open. Alessio gave no instructions, simply a subtle nod, and the car glided into the stream of traffic. The city lights blurred, casting fleeting patterns across his chiseled profile. The silence in the car was profound, broken only by the hum of the engine and the frantic beat of my own heart. I stole a glance at him. He sat utterly still, one hand resting on his knee, his eyes fixed on the illuminated cityscape. He exuded an aura of contained power, a coiled spring waiting to unlatch. My mind spun, torn between the terrifying realization of what I'd just done and the intoxicating pull of this man's dangerous charisma. Everything in me screamed that this was wrong, that I should demand to be taken home. But a traitorous part of me, the part that had just been publicly discarded, whispered of vengeance, of reckless, intoxicating freedom. This man felt like a weapon, and in my current state, I was desperate for one. "You knew my name," I said, the words barely audible. He turned his head slowly, his whiskey eyes pinning me. "I make it my business to know things." A faint smile played on his lips, a chilling hint of amusement. "Especially when those things are tied to interesting women." My mind raced. How could he have known my name? Had he been at the restaurant for a while, observing, or had he known before tonight? A prickle of unease snaked up my spine. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice firmer now, trying to project an authority I didn't feel. He finally looked at me fully, his gaze intense, possessive, sweeping over my face as if memorizing every curve. "Somewhere safe." His voice dropped, becoming a low, intimate murmur that bypassed my ears and settled deep in my bones. "Somewhere you belong." The car turned off the main thoroughfare, navigating narrow, tree-lined streets I didn't recognize. The houses grew larger, more secluded, walls higher. Finally, it slowed before a towering wrought-iron gate flanked by stone pillars that seemed to dissolve into the night sky. The gate swung open silently, revealing a long, winding driveway that disappeared into manicured darkness. As the car approached the imposing mansion at its end, a sudden, horrifying realization crashed over me. This wasn't just a powerful man's home. The architecture, the security, the sheer scale of the place. It wasn't merely grand. It was a fortress. And the name Alessio Costa, the way Regina Fitzwilliam had blanched at it. A chilling whisper from my father's hushed conversations echoed in my mind, the name of the man he'd spent a decade trying to corner, the man he called the Ghost, the Dawn. The car stopped. The driver opened my door. Before I could move, Alessio's hand was on my arm, his touch a possessive brand. His eyes, dark as the depths of an abyss, held mine. "Welcome home, Maya," he said, his voice soft yet absolute. "This is only the beginning." The heavy door of the sedan closed with a soft thud, a sound that resonated with finality. Alessio's touch remained on my arm, a warm, possessive anchor, as he guided me up the wide, shallow steps. The mansion loomed, a behemoth of darkened stone and arched windows, both ancient and impossibly modern, radiating an almost predatory stillness beneath the faint moonlight. Its grandeur felt less like an invitation and more like a declaration of dominion. My heart hammered against my ribs. A desperate bird trapped within a bone cage. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to break free of his grip and run back towards the gate, towards the city lights, towards anything that felt less like an opulent prison. But the memory of Liam's dismissive sneer, of Regina's venom, still burned. A raw wound, and the dangerous magnetic pull of Alessio Costa, a man who commanded with a glance and offered protection with a touch, was a potent, bewildering elixir. He was a terrifying unknown, but in that moment, the known world felt like an even greater threat. The enormous front door, carved with intricate, forgotten symbols, swung open silently as we approached, revealing a vast foyer that swallowed the night. Marble gleamed under the soft glow of concealed lighting, reflecting a vaulted ceiling painted with scenes of classical mythology. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood, expensive leather, and a faint, indefinable spice that whispered of distant lands and hidden opulence. Footsteps would echo here, I realized, every sound magnified, every movement observed. Alessio's hand slid from my arm to the small of my back, a feather-light pressure that nonetheless urged me forward deeper into his domain. He said nothing, simply moved, and I followed, propelled by an unsettling mixture of fear and an almost intoxicating curiosity. This wasn't rescue, it was a reclamation. A woman, tall and severe in a dark uniform, appeared from a shadowed alcove. Her silver hair was pulled back tightly, her face devoid of expression. She gave Alessio a respectful, almost reverent nod, her gaze flickering to me for a fraction of a second, an unreadable assessment in her cool blue eyes. "Prepare the Violetta suite for our guest. Maria," Alessio commanded, his voice a low, melodic rumble that vibrated through the silent hall. "Ensure she has everything she desires, and send a light supper, with a delicate wine, to her chambers." Maria inclined her head again, then turned, her movements as fluid and silent as a wraith. She vanished down a grand staircase, leaving us alone in the cavernous foyer. "Violetta suite?" I whispered, the absurdity of my situation momentarily overshadowing the danger. "I'm not a guest, Mr. Costa. I'm not sure what I am, but I assure you, I won't be staying." He turned to face me fully, his height dominating, his eyes, those deep, whiskey-colored pools, holding an almost unsettling amusement. "On the contrary, Maya, you are precisely my guest, and you will be staying, for as long as I deem it necessary." His gaze swept over my face, lingering on the subtle tremor in my lip. The world outside these walls is a harsher place than you realize, especially for a woman newly adrift. A woman with an unusual history, and even more unusual connections. My breath hitched. He knew about my father. The realization solidified the cold dread that had begun to pool in my stomach. My carefully constructed cover, my identity as a mere broken-hearted woman, was already shredded. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice thin but holding a flicker of defiance. "Is this about my father?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. A dangerous curve. "Everything is about something, Henkara. For now, let us simply say it is about balance, and about ensuring that a certain young woman learns how to be treated correctly." He took another step, closing the space between us until I could feel the faint heat radiating from his body. The scent of him, primal and refined, enveloped me. "You are safe here, Maya, completely, irrevocably safe. That is my promise. But that safety comes with a condition." His voice dropped to a near whisper, intimate and chilling. "You do not leave without my express permission." My jaw tightened. "And if I try?" His hand lifted, his thumb brushing lightly across my cheekbone, a gesture so tender it felt like a violation. My skin prickled. "Then you will discover the true meaning of disappointment in Tesoro. And I assure you, it will not be pleasant for anyone involved." His gaze held mine, unwavering, communicating a depth of resolve that stole the air from my lungs. Every fiber of my being recoiled from his possessive arrogance, from the chilling pronouncement of my captivity. But a traitorous flicker, deep within, acknowledged the unsettling calm his words invoked, the perverse comfort in his absolute certainty. He wouldn't let me leave. He would protect me. From Liam, from Regina, from the prying eyes of the city, from myself. It was a terrifying thought, but in that moment of profound vulnerability, it also held a strange, dark allure. He led me up the grand staircase, its banister a smooth, dark wood, worn by centuries of hands. Paintings in heavy gold frames lined the walls, their subjects' eyes seeming to follow us as we ascended. On the second floor, a long corridor stretched out, dimly lit, silent, save for the soft padding of our shoes on thick oriental rugs. The mansion was a labyrinth of luxury, a testament to power and history. He stopped before a set of double doors carved with intricate floral patterns. He pushed one open, revealing a room that seemed to breathe light. Windows overlooked a sprawling moonlit garden. The walls were a soft lavender, adorned with silk tapestries. A vast four-poster bed, draped in sheer flowing fabrics, dominated the space, a promise of opulent rest. "Your chambers," he announced, his hand sweeping outward in a gesture of proprietorship. "Make yourself comfortable." Maria was already there, laying out fresh clothing on a chaise lounge, a delicate silk robe, a soft cotton nightgown. She placed a tray laden with food and a crystal decanter of wine on a small table by the window. Without a word, she withdrew, melting back into the shadows. I stepped into the room, a strange sense of unreality washing over me. This was a gilded cage indeed, but even a cage, however beautiful, was still a cage. I walked to the window, my gaze drawn to the immaculate gardens below, the intricate topiary, the silent statues. My reflection stared back. A stranger in a crumpled, tear-stained dress, caught between a shattered past and a terrifyingly uncertain future. "I need to contact my family," I said, turning to Alessio. "They'll be worried." His expression remained impassive. "No, not yet. For their safety, and yours, they must believe you have vanished. Completely." He walked towards the door, his eyes scanning the room, as if imprinting every detail onto his memory. "Rest, Maya. We will speak more tomorrow." As he reached the threshold, I saw it. A subtle glint of movement from a half-open door further down the corridor. A low, guttural sound, sharp and strained, pierced the heavy silence, followed by a series of muffled thuds. A surge of icy dread shot through me. What was happening out there? My gaze flew to Alessio. His chiseled features remained utterly unchanged, his eyes devoid of any flicker of emotion, as if the sounds were utterly unremarkable. He paused, his hand on the doorframe, his gaze returning to me. "Sometimes my work requires discretion." His voice was soft, almost conversational, yet it carried an undercurrent of steel that made my blood run cold. He offered no further explanation. The door closed, a soft click that sealed me within my luxurious prison, leaving me alone with the echoing sounds and the chilling implication of his words. I stood frozen for a long moment, the sounds fading into the vastness of the mansion, replaced by the frantic beat of my own heart. He hadn't even flinched. The man who had shown me a fleeting, terrifying tenderness was also capable of an utter, chilling ruthlessness. The duality of him was a dangerous, captivating paradox. My initial shock gave way to a surge of adrenaline. I couldn't just sit here a pampered captive. This was my chance to act, to understand the parameters of my new reality. My gaze swept the room, searching for any sign of a phone, a way to reach out. There was none. Only the delicate wine and food, the opulent furnishings, and the impossible beauty of the moonlit garden. I paced the room, my mind a whirlwind of fear and a growing, desperate determination. I opened the wardrobe. It was enormous, filled with a selection of designer dresses, shoes, and handbags, all in my size, all reflecting a taste eerily similar to my own. A fresh wave of unease washed over me. He hadn't just swept me away. He had prepared for my arrival. He had studied me. My attention turned to the windows. The glass was thick, immaculately clean, offering an unblemished view of the verdant grounds. I tried to open one. It resisted, completely sealed, not just locked but immovable. My breath caught. I tried another. The same. Every window was a solid, impenetrable barrier. My gilded cage felt less like a protective embrace and more like a hermetically sealed box. I moved to the door that led to the corridor. My fingers trembled as I turned the handle. It was unlocked. A breath of hope, thin and fragile, stirred within me. Perhaps he wasn't as absolute as he appeared. Perhaps there was a chance for a brief exploratory excursion, a way to test the limits of his protection. Slipping into the silk robe Maria had left, I padded silently out into the corridor. The silence was profound, almost oppressive. The air was cool, carrying the faintest hint of that unique, expensive scent from the foyer. I moved like a ghost, past closed doors, each one a mystery. My pulse throbbed in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the mansion's pervasive quiet. I found the grand staircase again and descended, my bare feet making no sound on the cool marble. The foyer was empty, bathed in the same soft, indirect light. I made my way towards a side door I'd noticed on the drive-in, a smaller, less ornate entrance that seemed more likely to offer an inconspicuous exit. My hand reached for the cold metal handle. I twisted it gently, slowly. The latch clicked, and the door opened a fraction, revealing a sliver of cool night air, the faint rustle of leaves, the promise of freedom. My heart soared with a reckless, exhilarating hope. Just as I prepared to slip through the gap, a low, firm voice cut through the silence from directly behind me. "I wouldn't advise that, Signorina." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. I hadn't heard a single sound. No footsteps, no breath. How long had he been there? I turned, slowly, my breath catching in my throat. He stood perhaps 10 feet away, emerging from a shadowed alcove with the unsettling grace of a panther. Not Alessio, but a man of similar build, his face impassive, his eyes dark and watchful. He was dressed in a simple, dark suit, his hands clasped loosely behind his back. He moved with an economical stillness that spoke of dangerous training. "The Don's instructions were very clear," he continued, his voice devoid of threat, yet utterly resolute. "No one is to leave the premises without his explicit permission, and no one approaches this door without being escorted." His gaze, steady and unwavering, settled on the small, almost imperceptible device that encircled my left wrist, just beneath the silk sleeve of my robe, a device I hadn't even noticed until now. My blood ran cold as I saw it. A thin, elegant silver band, precisely fitted, almost invisible against my skin. My blood ran cold as I saw it. A thin, elegant silver band, precisely fitted, almost invisible against my skin. The silk sleeve, meant to conceal, now felt like a spotlight on my captive reality. A wave of disbelief, then a searing fury pulsed through me. I snatched my wrist back, as if the contact with his gaze could burn. "What is this?" The words tore from my throat, thin and sharp. The man, Luca, remained utterly still. "A proximity alarm, Signorina, and a tracker." His voice was a flat, even monotone, betraying no judgment, no remorse. "The Don is thorough. The word echoed like a death knell, not just trapped, but monitored. Every movement, every attempt at defiance recorded. My carefully constructed image of a clever escape artist crumbled around me. The small flicker of hope that had spurred me down the stairs extinguished, leaving behind a chilling void. "Remove it," I commanded, my voice gaining an edge of desperate authority. My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped thing. Luca's expression didn't shift. "That is not my directive." He gestured, a subtle tilt of his head towards the grand staircase. "Perhaps you should return to your chambers. The Don will want to discuss this." A tremor ran through me, a mix of fear and sheer, unadulterated rage. Discuss? There was nothing to discuss. This was an affront, an invasion. I stood my ground, my eyes blazing, refusing to be herded like a docile lamb. Every instinct screamed at me to fight, to scream, to shatter the oppressive calm of this gilded prison. A shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom of the foyer. Alessio Costa emerged, a silent, potent force. He moved with the effortless grace of a predator, his dark suit a stark silhouette against the pale marble. My gaze locked with his. Those whiskey eyes held a familiar, unnerving glint of amusement, but beneath it, a quiet disappointment, as if my attempt at escape was a minor vexation, a childish prank. "Good evening, Maya," he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble that seemed to fill the vast space, though it was barely above a whisper. "Did you enjoy your brief exploration?" "Remove this device," I repeated, ignoring his smooth pleasantry, thrusting my wrist forward, exposing the slender silver band. My voice trembled with indignation. "This is an outrage. I am not your prisoner." His gaze dropped to my wrist, then slowly lifted back to my face, A muscle twitched at the corner of his jaw, the only tell of his internal state. You are not a prisoner, Kara. You are under my protection, and my protection entails certain assurances. He took a step closer, his presence expanding, encompassing me. The air grew thick with his scent, the primal notes of leather and wood smoke now laced with a dangerous edge. Did you truly think you could simply walk out? After what happened tonight? What happened tonight was a public humiliation, not a death sentence. My voice rose, raw with emotion. I can take care of myself. I have a family who will be looking for me. A sardonic smile touched his lips, chillingly devoid of warmth. Your family, Tesoro, believes you have vanished. Completely, as I instructed. His eyes, dark and knowing, held mine captive. Do you truly believe a man as powerful as your father would not have already turned this city upside down if he thought you were merely missing? No, he believes you are elsewhere, out of his reach, perhaps on a spontaneous trip, perhaps with a new mysterious suitor who whisked you away. His gaze flickered to the silver band, then back to my face. He would never imagine his daughter was being carefully guarded in the very lion's den he spent a decade trying to breach. The implication struck me like a physical blow. He was right. My father, the FBI agent, would be tearing the city apart if he suspected foul play. The idea that Alessio had orchestrated a narrative of my spontaneous disappearance, effectively severing my connection to the outside world, was terrifyingly brilliant. It not only hid me but protected them from association with him. A cold dread seeped into my bones, replacing the fiery indignation. This wasn't just about me. It was a move in a much larger, darker game. You speak of my father as if you know him, I stated, the realization a bitter taste on my tongue. Of course you do. He's been trying to put you away for 10 years. Alessio's smile widened marginally, a predatory glint in his eyes. Indeed, a tenacious man. We have a professional respect, one might say. He paused, his gaze sweeping over my face, searching. Tell me, Maya, did you truly believe your engagement was simply about love, or did your father, the respected agent, see an opportunity in your union with the Fitzwilliams, a chance to finally bridge the gap between their world and mine? The accusation hit me harder than any physical strike. Liam a pawn? My father using me? The thought was revolting, unthinkable. My father would never— Your father, Alessio interrupted, his voice laced with an unsettling insight, is a man who understands the long game. And you, Maya, are a valuable asset in many games. His eyes held mine, deep and unwavering. Now, are you going to return to your room, or shall we continue this discussion out here, where my staff might overhear your increasingly desperate attempts at rebellion? My jaw tightened. Every instinct urged me to defy him, but a cold, logical part of my mind recognized the futility. Luca stood silently nearby, an immovable sentinel. Alessio was calm, controlled, his power absolute, and the chilling possibility that my engagement was indeed more complex than I'd ever imagined gnawed at me. My father, the man who preached justice and integrity, orchestrating a subtle infiltration through his own daughter, the thought was a sickening betrayal. Fine, I bit out, my voice tight with reluctant surrender. But I need clothes, my own clothes. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched his lips. Consider it done. Maria will see to your needs. Perhaps something less crumpled. His gaze lingered on my dress, a subtle judgment that pricked my pride. We will speak again over breakfast, and then we will discuss your future here. What you are, Maya, is precisely what I decide you are. He turned, the movement fluid and silent, and walked towards the grand staircase. Luca, with a final, unreadable glance, followed him, leaving me alone in the vast, echoing foyer. The subtle click of the small door that led to my suite, previously a beacon of hope, now sounded like the final turn of a key in a lock. I returned to my lavish prison, the silk robe feeling less like luxury and more like a shroud. The food Maria had left, a delicate pasta with herbs, remained untouched. I paced, the silence of the room amplifying the frantic drumbeat of my thoughts. Alessio Costa, Mafia Don, the ghost, my father's obsession. And now my captor, my protector, my warden. The thought of my father's face if he knew the truth sent a fresh wave of despair through me. This was not a rescue. This was a deeper entanglement than I could have ever imagined. Hours later, Sleep remained an elusive phantom. The soft glow of the moon spilled into the room, illuminating the opulent decor. My gaze fell upon a small, leather-bound book on the bedside table, a collection of classical poetry. I picked it up, running my thumb over the worn cover. Inside, a slim, neatly folded newspaper clipping was tucked between the pages. Curiosity, that dangerous, unwelcome guest, once again pricked at me. I unfolded the clipping. It was an article, clearly old, from an obscure financial paper, dated almost a year ago. It reported on a minor acquisition. A small shipping company based in Palermo, Sicily, purchased by a shell corporation with ties to a series of seemingly legitimate import-export businesses. Nothing remarkable on the surface, but a name jumped out at me, almost lost in the dense text. Giovanni Rossi. The name stirred a faint, unsettling memory, a fleeting image from my father's home office, a file left carelessly open on his desk after a late night. I remembered a blurry photo, a name, a location. Palermo. My father had been unusually tense that week, preoccupied, muttering about loose ends and old debts. My mind, trained by years of casual exposure to my father's world, began to work. Why would Alessio Costa, a man of his stature, bother with a decades-old minor financial article? Giovanni Rossi. The Palermo connection. What if Rossi wasn't just a minor player, but a ghost from Alessio's past? A rival? A betrayer? My father's files had often highlighted the intricate, almost generational feuds within the criminal underworld. A sudden jarring thought propelled me from the bed. What if Alessio had left this clipping, this carefully curated clue for me to find? A subtle test? Or a veiled plea for a different kind of alliance? He had said I was valuable in many games. Perhaps this was the game he meant. The following morning, Maria brought breakfast. Fresh fruit, warm pastries, fragrant coffee. My hunger, ignored since the previous evening's catastrophe, stirred. I ate slowly, my mind churning, replaying the newspaper clipping, searching for a pattern, a connection. The silver band on my wrist felt heavier than ever, a constant reminder of my physical confinement, but my mind, I realized, was still free. Later, Alessio arrived. He entered without a knock, the double doors swinging silently open to admit him. He wore a crisp, tailored suit of a lighter charcoal, his dark hair gleaming. His gaze swept the room, assessing, before settling on me as I stood by the window, the newspaper clipping tucked securely in the pocket of the silk robe I still wore. "Good morning, Maya," he said, his voice even, yet carrying an undercurrent of something expectant. "I trust you slept well?" "As well as can be expected, in a gilded cage," I retorted, my defiance a shield against the unsettling vulnerability that still lingered from the previous night. I met his gaze squarely. "We need to talk about my father." He inclined his head, a gesture of almost regal assent. "Indeed. Let us speak freely then. What troubles you most about Agent Monroe's involvement in your current predicament?" "My father is a man of honor," I began, my voice firm. "He would never involve me in anything remotely illicit. And he certainly wouldn't use me." A faint, almost cynical smile played on his lips. "Honor is a malleable concept, Holkara, especially when one is chasing a ghost for 10 years. Perhaps he simply has a different definition of using his resources." He walked to a small armchair, settling into it with an easy grace that suggested ownership of the entire room. He tried to cultivate the Fitzwilliams, knowing their connections to certain financial institutions that occasionally do business with my associates. Liam Fitzwilliam was merely a stepping stone, a bridge he hoped to build into my world through you. My stomach clenched. The brutal frankness of his words, the cold logic, resonated with a terrifying plausibility. My father was ambitious, dedicated to his cause, and I, in my innocence, had been the unwitting vehicle for his ambitions. "And you simply allowed it?" I challenged, a fresh surge of anger momentarily eclipsing the bitter taste of betrayal. "You let me walk into this elaborate trap?" "I observe, Maya," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "I learn, and when the time is right, I act. Your father provided me with an interesting dilemma. His daughter, poised to marry into a family that could offer him indirect access to my operations. A risky gamble for him, an even riskier one for me if I allowed it to proceed unchecked. Your public humiliation merely accelerated my timeline. It created an opening for me to intervene, to claim you. His voice dropped, becoming a low, possessive murmur. And now you are here, no longer a pawn in your father's game, but a piece on my board. A valuable piece. My mind raced. This was the moment. The power shift. He saw me as a piece, a resource. I could be passive, or I could seize control of my own narrative. I am not a piece, I stated, my voice steady, imbued with a newfound resolve. I reached into my robe and produced the newspaper clipping, holding it out. I'm a player, and I know more than you think. His gaze sharpened, falling to the clipping in my hand. He took it, his long fingers brushing mine, a fleeting, almost electric contact. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the faded print. The quiet amusement vanished, replaced by a deep, intense focus. Giovanni Rossi, I elaborated, watching his face intently for any flicker of reaction. Palermo, a minor shipping company acquisition nearly a year ago, a name my father mentioned once in hushed tones. Loose ends, he called them. Old debts. I paused, letting my words sink in. My father, a federal agent, isn't concerned with minor financial transactions, Alessio. He's concerned with threats, and I suspect this Giovanni Rossi is a far greater threat than you realize. Alessio's eyes, usually so guarded, held a flash of something unreadable. Surprise, perhaps, or a grudging respect. His gaze returned to the article, lingering on the name, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He looked up, his whiskey eyes pinning me with an intensity that stole my breath. You recognize this name, he stated. Not a question, but an observation. And you deduced its significance. My father, I replied, a subtle pride in my voice, taught me how to read between the lines. He taught me about patterns, about vulnerabilities. Rossi isn't just a competitor, is he? He's a ghost from your past, a man you thought was long gone, resurfacing. And this minor acquisition isn't about business. It's about laying a trap, building a foundation to strike at you, perhaps through those financial institutions your associates deal with. He stood then, slowly, deliberately. The clipping remained in his hand, crumpled slightly from the force of his grip. He walked towards me, closing the distance, his presence overwhelming. I held my ground, meeting his gaze, refusing to flinch. You are a remarkably perceptive woman, Maya, he murmured, his voice a low, dangerous caress, more so than I anticipated. His gaze dropped to my lips, lingering there, then swept back to my eyes. And what do you propose to do with this? Perception? I propose an alliance, I stated, my heart pounding a furious rhythm against my ribs. You keep me safe. You ensure my family remains untouched, and in return I help you see the blind spots. The ways a law enforcement mind might approach your world, the weaknesses a man like Rossi might exploit. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I am not a pawn. I am a shield, or a sword, your choice. A long silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken tension. His eyes searched mine, dissecting every nuance of my expression. I felt utterly exposed, yet fiercely determined. This was my leverage, my chance to reclaim some semblance of agency. Finally, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Not the predatory baring of teeth, but a subtle, genuine curve that softened the harsh lines of his face. A sword, he pronounced, his voice a low, gravelly assent. I like the sound of that, but you must understand. Tesoro, a sword, once unsheathed, cannot be put away easily. He took another step, his fingers reaching out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. The touch was feather-light, yet it sent a shiver through me, a strange mix of apprehension and an intoxicating sense of being truly seen. You are playing a dangerous game, Maya, more dangerous than any you have known. I have nothing left to lose, I whispered, the words true, raw. His gaze darkened, a flicker of something ancient and possessive in their depths. Ah, but you do. You have your life. And you have me. His thumb brushed my lower lip, a feather-light contact that sent a jolt of heat through me. And now, Maya, we have an appointment. He turned abruptly, the shift in his demeanor instantaneous. The softened edges gone, replaced by his usual controlled intensity. "Luca!" he called, his voice echoing through the open doors. Luca appeared instantly. "Sir, ready the car, and have my security detail double their perimeter checks. Tonight. I want a full sweep of the property, every approach, every shadow. And I want a full dossier on Giovanni Rossi on my desk within the hour. Everything we have, everything we don't have." Luca's expression remained impassive, but a subtle tension in his shoulders betrayed the urgency of the command. "At once, Don." He vanished. Alessio turned back to me, his eyes sharp, assessing. "Get dressed. Something practical." "You are coming with me. Coming where?" I asked, my heart hammering. "To address a developing situation," he said, his voice clipped. "A situation your father's loose ends have inadvertently revealed. And since you are now my sword, Maya, you will observe, perhaps even guide." A corner of his mouth lifted. "It's time you saw the true meaning of protection from both sides of the coin." The prospect was terrifying, exhilarating. My first real taste of his world, not as a captive, but as an ally. A strange, twisted excitement coiled in my belly. My mind, usually focused on legal precedents and societal decorum, now hummed with a dangerous anticipation. I quickly changed into a pair of dark, tailored trousers and a silk blouse Maria had placed in the wardrobe, then slipped on a pair of flat, comfortable shoes. The elegant silver band on my wrist felt less like a mark of captivity and more like a badge of this new, perilous allegiance. When I emerged, Alessio was waiting, his expression unreadable. He led me through the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, past doors that remained closed, silent. We descended a private stairwell, emerging not into the grand foyer, but into a sleek, minimalist garage. Several black luxury sedans gleamed under the soft lighting, and a handful of formidable-looking men in dark suits stood nearby, their gazes sharp and alert. Alessio's presence in this setting was even more pronounced, radiating a primal authority. He spoke a few clipped words in Italian to one of the men, who nodded crisply. Then he opened the back door of one of the sedans, gesturing me inside. I slid in, the leather seats cool beneath me. Alessio followed, settling in beside me, his thigh brushing mine, a silent declaration of proximity. The car glided out of the garage, the heavy door closing silently behind us. The security gate swung open, then shut again, sealing us into the night. We drove through the sprawling grounds, past manicured hedges and ancient trees, finally merging onto a winding road. The city lights began to appear in the distance, a glittering tapestry, a stark contrast to the shadowy world we were entering. The silence in the car was thick, charged with anticipation. Alessio remained still, his gaze fixed on the passing darkness, his profile a study in granite resolve. My own heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. I glanced at him, a strange feeling blooming in my chest. A flicker of concern, perhaps for the man who was leading me into danger, yet whose presence simultaneously offered a perverse sense of safety. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the darkness ahead. A deafening roar split the night, followed by the sickening crunch of metal. The car lurched violently, tires screeching as the driver slammed on the brakes. We were thrown forward, then back, as the vehicle spun wildly. Shards of glass rained down from the shattered side window. Alessio moved with terrifying speed. His arm shot out, a steel band around my waist, yanking me against his chest, shielding me with his own body as another explosion ripped through the air, closer this time. The smell of burning rubber and acrid smoke flooded the cabin. His grip was fiercely possessive, crushing, yet it was the only thing anchoring me in the chaos. My face was pressed against his expensive suit jacket, his scent filling my lungs, a strange blend of danger and unexpected comfort. "Stay down," he bellowed, his voice raw, uncharacteristic. The world outside was a kaleidoscope of flashing lights, frantic shouts, and the relentless staccato of gunfire. Our car, now a crippled hulk, listed precariously. Through the shattered window, I glimpsed movement. Shadowy figures advancing, weapons glinting in the faint, flickering light of distant fires. The attack was swift, coordinated, and utterly merciless. A sharp, searing pain tore through Alessio's left shoulder, his grip momentarily faltering. A low, guttural grunt escaped his lips, a sound of primal agony that shocked me to my core. Blood, dark and viscous, bloomed on the crisp white fabric of his shirt, seeping through my thin blouse where my cheek pressed against him. Alessio. The name tore from my lips, a desperate plea. He ignored the wound, his eyes wild and feral, scanning the approaching assailants. His hand, no longer on my waist, was on his gun, drawing it with a fluid, terrifying expertise. "Luca!" he roared, but the driver was slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. He pushed me lower, forcing my head against the seat. "Don't move!" he commanded, his voice strained but absolute. "Stay hidden. Do you understand?" Just as he prepared to unleash a volley of gunfire, a new sound pierced the din, the high-pitched whine of a single powerful shot, not from the ground, but from above. A second later, a deafening crack splintered the already shattered windshield directly in front of my face. The bullet had torn through the glass, leaving a starburst pattern of death inches from my head. The cold realization crashed over me. They weren't just after Alessio. They were after me, and they knew exactly where I was. The bullet had torn through the glass, leaving a starburst pattern of death inches from my head. The cold realization crashed over me. They weren't just after Alessio. They were after me, and they knew exactly where I was. A primal scream clawed at my throat, but no sound escaped. My entire world narrowed to the searing pressure of Alessio's arm, a vice around my waist, pulling me tighter against him. His body was a shield, his breath ragged against my hair. The scent of gunpowder filled my nostrils, mingling with the coppery tang of his blood. The staccato rhythm of gunfire intensified, punctuated by shouts in an unfamiliar dialect. Shadows danced in the flickering light of a distant blaze, revealing figures swarming the wrecked sedan like starved wolves. "Stay still." "Maya," he rasped, his voice a low growl of pure menace, meant not for me, but for his unseen enemies. His injured shoulder pulsed against me, a wet warmth spreading through his jacket, but his focus remained absolute, terrifying. He leveraged himself, pulling his gun free with a terrifying fluidity, his movements unhindered by the bullet lodged in his flesh. Through the splintered windshield, I saw them. 3 men, fast-moving, their faces obscured by balaclavas, converging on our disabled vehicle. One carried a larger rifle, another a glinting blade. My father's words, forgotten for years, suddenly echoed in my mind, a lecture on tactical analysis, on observing the periphery. My gaze snapped upwards, not to the approaching ground assailants, but to the source of that high-pitched whine, that impossible shot from above. A faint glint, a tiny pinprick of reflected light, shimmered from the rooftop of an abandoned warehouse on the horizon, several hundred yards away. A sniper. And the way that last bullet had targeted my head, not his, was no accident. They knew I was here, and they wanted me gone. "The roof," I choked out, pressing my face further into his shoulder, a desperate whisper against the din. "Warehouse, far side, a sniper. He shot at me." Alessio froze for a fraction of a second, a tremor running through his powerful frame that had nothing to do with pain. His eyes, now glinting with a dangerous, predatory awareness, followed my barely perceptible nod. He hadn't seen it, caught as he was in the immediate ground assault. My father's lessons, his relentless insistence on observation, on seeing what others missed, suddenly felt like a lifeline, a secret language I could speak in this new, terrifying world. "Clever girl," he breathed, a low, almost feral approval in his tone, even as he twisted, firing a precise shot that dropped one of the approaching figures with a sickening thud. He didn't wait for my full explanation. He trusted my instincts, a terrifying, exhilarating leap of faith. He shoved me down again, harder this time, completely beneath the dashboard. "Stay there, don't move," he commanded, his voice raw with urgency. "Don't even breathe." Then he was a whirlwind of violent motion. He wasn't just defending, he was unleashing a storm. The car became a fortress, a steel and glass cage from which he launched a devastating counterattack. Gunshots erupted in quick, brutal succession. The smell of burning rubber, blood, and something metallic filled the air. I heard grunts, muffled cries, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the pavement. He moved with a speed and ferocity that transcended human limits. A force of nature personified. Each bullet fired was a precise instrument of destruction, each movement a deadly dance. The world outside the car was chaos, but his movements within were controlled, lethal. I heard the frantic shouts of his remaining security detail, now engaging the attackers further down the road, their reinforcements finally arriving. But Alessio was a one-man army, his focus singular, annihilating the threat to us. He wasn't just a man. He was a machine of retribution, a creature forged in the fires of violence, exquisite in his ruthlessness. Just as the ground assault seemed to wane, another high-pitched whine from above, a searing crack that tore through the car's roof, inches from where I was hidden. The sniper, still active, still targeting me. "Alessio, the sniper," I screamed, pushing myself up despite his command, adrenaline surging through my veins. "He's still there!" Alessio cursed, a guttural sound in Italian. His eyes, burning with a cold fire, met mine. "He wants you," he stated, his voice tight. "He's good." "He's overexposed," I countered, my mind racing, remembering my father's lectures on sniper strategy. "Too much direct line of sight. He's too confident. A moving target, even a slow one, would throw him off." Alessio's gaze was sharp, dissecting my words, processing my analysis with astonishing speed. He didn't question how I knew. He simply absorbed the data. A flicker of something, a strange glint of pride, sparked in his eyes, even in the midst of the blood-soaked terror. "Hold tight," he barked. He kicked the driver's slumped body with unexpected force, then reached for the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life with a dying groan. The car, a mangled hulk, lurched forward, tires screaming, swaying wildly as Alessio wrestled the steering wheel with his uninjured arm, his other arm pressed tightly against his bleeding shoulder. The sudden movement, however clumsy, threw the sniper off. Another bullet whizzed past, missing us entirely, slamming into a tree nearby. The car shuddered, listing dangerously to one side, but it was moving. We were moving. Alessio didn't drive away. He drove through the remaining attackers, a horrifying, visceral act of pure, unadulterated power. Metal shrieked, bodies flew, and the air filled with the horrific sounds of splintering bone and shattered glass. My stomach churned, but a perverse, terrifying part of me felt a rush of something akin to awe. This was the ghost. This was the Dawn. He had claimed me, and he would eradicate anyone who dared to challenge that claim. Finally, the car broke free, leaving the carnage behind. It wasn't a clean escape. The vehicle was barely holding together, groaning, smoking, but it was moving. We were alive. Alessio drove for what felt like an eternity, his jaw clenched, his breathing ragged, until the mansion's towering gates finally appeared in the distance, a beacon of improbable safety. He pulled up to the gates, which swung open instantly without the need for a code. His remaining security detail, now numbering 4 men, pulled up behind us in 2 other vehicles, their faces grim, their weapons still drawn. "Get her inside," Alessio commanded, his voice strained but steady, as the car finally shuddered to a halt. "See to my shoulder, and then prepare a perimeter. A full perimeter. No one sleeps tonight." 2 of his men, grim-faced, moved to my side of the car, offering their hands. But I ignored them. My gaze was fixed on Alessio, on the blood blooming, on his shirt, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow, the sheer, raw power emanating from him even in his wounded state. "You're hurt," I whispered, my voice rough with the lingering taste of terror. My hand, still trembling, reached out to touch his arm, avoiding the wound. His eyes, dark as midnight, met mine. The ferocity that had consumed him moments before had receded, replaced by an unnerving stillness. "A scratch," he dismissed, though his pallor suggested otherwise. "Nothing I haven't survived before." His gaze, however, lingered on my face, searching, assessing. A flicker of something tender, almost possessive, softened the hard lines around his eyes. "You saved me, Maya. You saw what I missed." A strange heat bloomed in my chest, a dangerous fusion of terror, gratitude, and an undeniable attraction. He had called it a scratch, but the pain etched on his face, though carefully masked, was profound. And the fact that he acknowledged my contribution, his vulnerability in admitting he'd missed something, spoke volumes. I followed him into the mansion. The grand foyer still bathed in soft, indirect light, a stark contrast to the brutal darkness we had just escaped. Maria, her face etched with concern, rushed forward with a first aid kit. Alessio waved her away, his gaze still fixed on me. "To my study," he ordered, his voice still low, but with a new edge of command. "Alone." Maria hesitated, but the look in Alessio's eyes was absolute. She bowed her head, then retreated, leaving us isolated once more. He led me down a different corridor, past more closed doors, until we reached a heavy oak door carved with intricate symbols. He pushed it open, revealing a room that was both austere and deeply personal. Walls lined with leather-bound books, a massive mahogany desk littered with papers, a scent of old parchment and expensive cigars. A roaring fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the room. He sank into a large leather armchair by the fire, his uninjured arm resting on the armrest, his head tilted back. He closed his eyes for a moment, a rare glimpse of exhaustion, of the immense physical and mental toll this night had taken. I knelt beside him, my fingers fumbling with the buttons of his blood-soaked jacket. "Let me help," I insisted, my voice barely a whisper. My hands, still trembling, moved with a sudden, surprising confidence. My father had often sustained injuries in the field. I knew how to clean a wound, how to dress it. A strange, intimate dance began, one born of necessity and the raw, undeniable current that hummed between us. I carefully peeled back the blood-matted fabric, exposing the wound on his shoulder. It was deep, angry, but clean. I worked quickly, efficiently, my movements practiced, born from an unexpected visceral desire to ease his pain. The touch of my fingers on his skin was electric, a jolt that had nothing to do with pain, everything to do with the intense awareness of his proximity. His muscles were corded steel beneath my touch, his skin warm, radiating a raw masculine power. He watched me, his whiskey eyes half-lidded, his gaze intense, possessive, never leaving my face. The vulnerability he allowed in that moment, the silent surrender to my ministrations, was more potent than any display of strength. It was a silent acknowledgement of a bond, forged in fire and blood. When I finished, bandaging the wound with a professional neatness that surprised even myself, I sat back on my heels, my breath catching in my throat. His gaze, dark and unyielding, held mine. The air in the room was thick with unspoken emotions, fear, relief, gratitude, and a potent, dangerous hunger. He reached out, his uninjured hand cupping my jaw, his thumb stroking my cheekbone. The touch was feather-light, yet it seared my skin, awakening a cascade of sensations. "You faced them down, Maya," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly caress. "You warned me. You fought beside me, in your own way." His thumb brushed my lower lip, a deliberate, teasing motion that stole the breath from my lungs. "You are more than I expected. More than a pawn. More than a shield. You are a weapon. And you," I whispered, my voice raw, "are more than a monster. You saved my life. Again." His eyes darkened, a fire igniting deep within their depths. He pulled me closer, his hand tangling in my hair, tilting my head back. My body, still humming with adrenaline, responded without conscious thought. All my internal screams of protest, of the danger, of the wrongness, were drowned out by a deafening chorus of yes, a primal urge to surrender to the intoxicating power he wielded. His lips met mine then, not with tenderness, but with a raw, consuming intensity that ravaged every thought, every inhibition. It was a kiss born of survival, of shared terror, of the desperate clinging to life itself. His mouth was hot, demanding, tasting of blood and smoke and something else, something utterly masculine and untamed. I responded with a ferocity that startled me, my hands gripping his shoulders, my fingers digging into the hard muscle, drawing him closer still. Every sense sharpened, the heat of his body, the rasp of his stubble against my skin, the wild thrum of his heartbeat against mine. This was not gentle exploration. This was a claiming, a devouring. My body arched against his, seeking closer contact, desperate for the connection, for the oblivion he promised. The fear, the humiliation, the pain of the night, all of it dissolved in the searing heat of his touch, his kiss. It was terrifying, exhilarating, utterly consuming. He lifted me then, effortlessly, carrying me from the study, through the silent corridors, up the grand staircase. My arms clung to his neck, my face buried in his shoulder, inhaling his scent, a heady mix of danger and a perverse sense of belonging. The Violetta suite, my gilded cage, now felt like a sanctuary. He laid me gently on the vast, soft bed, his gaze never leaving mine, his eyes burning with an unholy light. His hands, powerful yet surprisingly tender, moved over my body, shedding the crumpled silk robe, the remnants of my previous life. Each touch was a caress, a possessive claiming that ignited every nerve ending. My skin prickled, flushed. Every part of me screamed for more, for the complete, total surrender I hadn't known I craved. And when he finally joined me, the world outside the opulent chamber ceased to exist. There was only the heat of skin against skin, the rhythm of desperate breaths, the intoxicating pleasure of two damaged souls finding a fierce, undeniable solace in each other's embrace. It was a baptism by fire, a consummation of defiance, fear, and an utterly forbidden attraction. When the dawn finally painted the room in hues of lavender and gold, I lay wrapped in his arms, the scent of him clinging to my skin, the weight of his body a comforting anchor. The events of the night before felt like a brutal dream, yet the throbbing in my shoulder, the faint ache in my muscles, and the fierce tenderness in my heart confirmed its horrifying reality. And he was still here, still a presence, a force of nature. His eyes, when they opened, were soft, a startling vulnerability in their depths. He looked at me, truly looked at me, as if seeing me for the very first time, and the intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. "Maya," he murmured, his voice husky with sleep, but imbued with a seriousness that left no room for doubt. "Last night, it was a glimpse into my world, the constant danger, the enemies, the compromises." He paused, his thumb stroking my jawline. "You saved my life, and I claimed yours." He pushed himself up, leaning on his uninjured elbow, his expression now serious, almost somber. "You are a woman of immense strength, Maya, of courage, of intellect. You belong here by my side if you so choose. But it would not be an easy life. It would be a life lived on the knife's edge, a life of constant vigilance, of knowing that danger is always a breath away. It would mean embracing this darkness, becoming a part of it." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the quiet morning. This was it, the choice, the moment of truth. "Or," he continued, his voice softer now, almost regretful, "I can arrange for you to disappear, truly disappear. A new identity, a safe place, far from here, far from me. A life of quiet anonymity, free from the shadows, free from this world. Your father would eventually find peace, believing you'd simply moved on, started anew. You would be safe, you would be free." He laid out the options with stark clarity, offering me a gilded escape, a chance to reclaim the safe, predictable life that had been so cruelly snatched away. Every rational part of me screamed to take the second option, to run, to flee this beautiful, terrifying prison and the dangerous man who offered it. The memory of my father, his unwavering belief in justice, his tireless fight against men like Alessio, screamed for me to choose freedom. But then I looked at Alessio Costa, at the dark, powerful man whose touch had ignited a fire in my soul, whose ruthless protection had saved my life. I remembered Liam's disdain, Regina's venom, the cold, empty humiliation of my old life. And I remembered the fierce, exhilarating thrill of facing down death at his side, of seeing what others missed, of feeling truly alive, truly seen. For the very first time, my hand reached out, Not for the distant promise of freedom, but for his. My fingers intertwined with his. A silent declaration. His grip tightened, firm, possessive. "I choose this," I said, my voice steady, resolute. A powerful, undeniable certainty blossomed in my chest. "I choose you. I am not running from danger, Alessio. I am running towards the only place I've ever felt truly alive. Towards the man who sees me, truly sees me. I am not a pawn. I am your sword. And I am staying." A slow, possessive smile spread across his face, lighting his whiskey eyes with a triumphant, dangerous glow. He pulled me closer, crushing me against his body, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was both a promise and a fierce, unspoken oath. The future was uncertain, perilous, but for the first time in my life I was choosing it. I was choosing him, and I had never felt more powerful, more utterly free.